Welcome to the Trailblazers. I'm Perry Rarick, your host. The purpose of this interview series is to share with you interesting discussions I have with trailblazing business leaders. They're innovative, thought provoking, and they're not afraid to challenge the status quo. My guest today is Darren Hieber. He is the Senior Vice President of Corporate Development at Lifecore Biomedical, a pharmaceutical contract development and manufacturing organization that specializes in really challenging, complex formulations. And we're going to hear a little bit about that from Darren. He's responsible for Lifecore's corporate strategy. And if that sounds like a big job, you're right. That's a big, big job. He has a passion for strategic business development focused on driving results. He has over 20 years of experience in B2B life sciences, business development, and high growth environments. Previously, he served as Vice President of Business Development at Catalent Biologics, and before that, Cook Pharmica. Darren, welcome to the Trailblazers.
Hi, Perry. Nice to be with you. Good afternoon.
It's good to have you. This is great. I've been looking forward to this for quite a while. B2B life sciences is pretty high adventure stuff. It's not easy. There's a lot going on that makes it challenging. We're going to talk about some topics that typically don't rise up. Well, everybody wants to talk about capabilities and capacity, all that scientific and engineering stuff. We're going to talk about leadership, culture, how do you align business development with operations, things that can cripple the success of a business. But first, I want to ask you about your role. You are the Senior Vice President of Corporate Development. So first of all, what does that mean? What does a Senior Vice President of Corporate Development do? And what do you specifically do at Lifecore?
Well, thank you, Perry. I think probably the biggest way to, or the best way to characterize it, it's really outwardly facing business activities as far as what a client would see and kind of touch and feel as it relates to our business, be it from marketing, as an example, rolls up through me and in our teams. So, collateral development, any kind of always on marketing type of functions from social media perspective, web and LinkedIn and those deals and those modalities, if you will, or opportunities for folks to find and see Lifecore. And then the business development team. One of the things that I was brought into Lifecore to do was to get Lifecore a little bit more commercially ready for growth and to expand what we work on. When I was brought into the group, there wasn't an outwardly facing sales team, and really, to Lifecore's credit, grew organically and by word of mouth, just by what we're able to do internally and with the capabilities and know-how that we had. So I put a commercial sales team in place, and so that group rolls up through me. There's a contracting aspect of what we do relative to obviously the day-to-day with CDAs and NDAs and being able to facilitate having conversations with clients, candid conversations with clients, but then also on the supply agreement side, on the clinical side, then also on the commercial side, really setting up the rules of the road, if you will, on how the relationship's going to work with the customers that we have. So, I mean, I think in a nutshell, that's the primarily the majority of what my rolls up into my role. I think the other side, in circumstances with the options of growth and looking at different types of sites or other things from an expansion perspective, albeit we haven't done a lot of that in the last 2 to 3 years with Lifecore, that would be something that would be a part of what I would participate in as well, just from a commercial perspective.
It's a big role. I don't often run into, that title. And so it's very interesting to hear about it. It's a lot. You have a lot of responsibilities. I would argue that it doesn't fit inside a nutshell. It's much bigger than that. So that's pretty good. Now, when you joined Lifecore, they were going through a transition. and you had already mentioned they didn't have a sales team. They had no business development externally, so a lot of challenges. The first thing I want to ask you is what was appealing about the role to you at that particular point when you heard that?
Yeah, it's well, I guess the biggest thing, and I shouldn't sell, and definitely it's by no means anything negative to the folks that were at Lifecore. I think there's probably a lot of people that did a lot of selling, right? But maybe nobody that had it specifically as their singular job function or title, perhaps. Same thing with marketing, really, too. But at Lifecore, I think one of the bigger things I found appealing was that it's a company and we've been in business for 60 years and really 40 as a regulated industry, FDA, kind of typical CDMO, medicines type company, if you will. Um, but with that, there's a lot of technology and know-how in the building that was interesting to me. Lifecore has grown organically and now with a focused sales group in areas that aren't typical from the CDMO perspective. And what I mean by that, and you mentioned it in your opening, is viscous programs, things that are really challenging from a formulation or scale up type of situation, or even just from a filling perspective. I mean, I'm talking about filling syringes with substances that are maybe a million centipoise. And from a biologics background and kind of standard potency water like solutions where I came from, with, the Baxter group that I had worked with even before Cook Pharmica and Catalent, that was interesting to me. Couple that with assets that were being, on order and gonna be qualified within the Lifecore site that would, set us up to be able to work with things that were, more water-like, peristaltic pump in a Groninger isolator, a scan or Groninger filler with a scan isolators, a filler that we just added. So if you pair that technology coming into the building with the know-how from a viscosity standpoint, my thought was, my goodness, this group can fill the really hard stuff. Certainly, we can be competitive and fill things that are maybe perhaps a little bit easier. So, being able to leverage the know-how in the building in the current market or more of the traditional CDMO landscape was what was really appealing. And I think the other thing too, and it probably goes back to the role and how broad it is from my perspective, is Lifecore is a little bit smaller company. I mean, we're in the, mid 400s as far as employees go. So you've got to wear a few more hats, and so that was appealing as well as being able to come in and really put a stamp on, where we're going from a strategy perspective too. So.
Yeah. So I want to ask you, you've been around this business, specifically CDMOs. You have a lot of experience in CDMOs. It is it's a part of it's a segment of this industry that's always in flux. There's a lot of venture capital activity, mergers and acquisitions every week. There's a new announcement. Capacity and capabilities are always shifting. It's hard to stay up on that. How do you see that landscape, that that moving landscape? How do you size it up? Because you seem like a pretty optimistic guy with the opportunities that are out there.
Well, I think it's true, and it's really probably one of the biggest benefits of our business. I mean, over the years, pharmaceutical companies generally went from brick and mortar manufacturing type facilities or companies, if you will, to more now, and maybe even, broadly in the last 10 years, or maybe even longer than that. They're more marketing and research companies, and then outsource so much on a manufacturing standpoint. And I mean, I've always said too, and I don't think any business is recession proof per se, but when you look at what we do as a service, and it's certainly not for the faint of heart, and we can talk for that talk about that more too. But in industries that would look to maybe cut or change from the investment in brick and mortar and maintaining an FDA regulated facility, it's pretty easy to outsource. And certainly, and I've always said this too, when the CDMO market is strong, meaning there aren't quality issues broadly across CDMOs, There's capacity in the market. CDMOs are keeping up with the latest technologies from a filler perspective or from a speed on assembly of auto injectors and syringes, right? More downstream on the packaging side. The stronger our business is in the CDMO side, and then also then the easier it is to outsource, right? It makes that decision and kind of that paradigm shift in the pharma industry bigger, and then easier for us to support the pharmaceutical development landscape. And I think the other side of it too, when you look at just sheer numbers of monoclonals in development across a broad array of different therapeutic classes, and then you add GLP-1s and you add ADCs and you add all these different types of pharmaceuticals, if you will, right? With different types of modalities and different types of mechanisms of action. It really sets the CDMO landscape up to be a really a rich industry. So I'm thankful for that, and from an optimism perspective, again, looking at money being put back into the pharmaceutical market with a good economy, then that just means more opportunities for CDMOs to be able to support projects and development.
Now, earlier we spoke in a previous conversation, we spoke a little bit about, I'm going to put it under the bucket of integrating business development with operations.
Mhm.
So vitally important. I hear horror stories about organizations that aren't. They view all sales as good sales. They bring in something and then they try to, it's not a good fit for what the CDMO is really good at. So we talked a little bit about that, and you've got a great system. You've got for lack of another term, you have a framework that brings in the right kind of business, and you have a rhythm to make sure you stay close to that and you
Right.
bring it in. You already mentioned you've got some, like you have a competency, a core competency in managing viscous materials, which not everybody, very few people can do. So can you talk a little bit about that framework and how you make sure you're getting the right kind of business that's going to be really successful for you and of course the drug sponsor as well?
Yeah, I think well, first of all, when you talk about strategy, I think that's probably the bigger, right? And having the buy-in with your facility and functional area buy-in. From the standpoint, and we'll look at maybe Lifecore specifically, working with viscous programs and viscous polymers and maybe not antibodies historically. What I needed to make sure when in others would need to as well, when you're setting a course or a strategy to be able to work on different types of programs, you have to really have everybody aligned in the building, engineers and QC, QA, right? The whole site, so that when programs come to the site or your NBD team is doing their job and bringing opportunities into the site, it's not a fight or, or just a question on why are we looking at this, right? You've already got an alignment just based on the strategy that you're hitting the road with. So that's a big part of it. And folks that know me and my mentors will laugh probably when they hear this, but there's a pretty simplistic way to look at programs easily. Is it a right fit, right? Just technology wise, is it a fit for the site? Can your equipment handle it? Is there significant CapEx involved, which maybe doesn't make it one of the best opportunities? And I mean, can you win it and do you want to win it? Are really how you look at it, right? Is it a good fit from a technology perspective? Is it a good fit with the client? Are our standards and what the client is going to ask for timeline wise, are they aligned? And so, it's maybe less than about an evaluation of a molecule per se, but an evaluation of your partner. And so that's a big thing that we like to do too, is making sure, I mean, nothing is gonna sour a relationship more if there's unaligned expectations at the beginning of a tech transfer, right? You have to make sure that it's a program, that, everybody's rowing in the same direction, and that's the folks in the CDMO or in the Lifecore, building along with the clients as well. So, setting the strategy and have everybody aligned internally, and then it's a really pretty quick process then when you're evaluating different types of opportunities to bring them in and really be able to say, yeah, this is something that we can really sink our teeth into and let's go for it. So
I heard you once describe Lifecore as nimble, and you did say, "Well, we're kind of small. We only have 400 folks. 400 is still pretty big for an organization that wants to be nimble." So, what does it mean? What does nimble mean to you, and how do you achieve it at Lifecore?
but I think one of the biggest things that Lifecore's done over the years, and in turn will with the newer assets that are coming in the building, is that having the ability to, you look at different types of programs and being nimble to me is being able to work on, within the, maybe even to take a step back in the CDMO space. I think it's a detriment for a group to be laser focused on everything commercial, everything commercial. I think having a good array or breadth of supporting clients and their pipelines, maybe that's a little bit earlier phase, mid phase, or being able to scale up and commercialize programs. I think that's a nice way to be able to look at a pipeline and who and what you work with. But having said that, though, being nimble is having assets or fillers, maybe said differently, that can support differing phases. So there's an aspect of being nimble by virtue of the capabilities you have. As an example, we have a single-headed Flexicon filler with peristaltic pump. It's good for early phase, small scale programs. So you can be nimble with that. And then, as you graduate with the different assets we have, as you get, as you get bigger or perhaps maybe as batch sizes get bigger with different types of programs. On the other side with that though too, and I think where good CDMOs differentiate is being able to support small scale, right? And then also being able to support larger scale. But with that though, it's how you can kind of wring capacity out of your machines by how you operate them, having a robust S&OP process. So you set your production schedule weekly, monthly, however, you set it up for success by how you align the different programs that you're bringing in and that you manufacture. And then with that, how quickly you turn your equipment and just that knowledge and understanding of how to set batches up, how to set a schedule up, how to turn the equipment most efficiently to be able to, again, get more capacity, get more, speed out of different, assets that you have supporting the different programs. So, I think that's probably one of the biggest aspects of nimble that I think of is just really being able to own your site and own your processes, and then ultimately that helps with release timing and satisfying what clients want, so
You know, the engineers usually speak about things that you just stated, and it's so refreshing to hear you talk about getting more from the equipment and synchronizing the projects, and it's just really brilliant.
I've always been kind of an equipment geek, right? Like when I started in pharma, candidly, as a drug rep, right? I was all the way downstream selling to physicians, and so when I got an opportunity to go upstream, if you will, and into Baxter at that time to work on in the CDMO space, I was a marketing manager, and so I spent a lot of time and this is when I lived in Bloomington, and that site was in Bloomington, Indiana, still is. It's a Simtra site now, but I spent a lot of time talking with engineers and talking with folks on the line and just walking the plant to understand how they worked, and my thought was, maybe simplistically, but if I'm gonna market a site, I better darn sure know how the assets work, right? And what's our value proposition on this line or on that line? What do we how do we differentiate ourselves in the market? And so that's something that I've always, taken with the different sites is really being able to understand what we have and where you can position it within the marketplace.
Yeah, it's more rare than I'd like to feel good about. It's a fairly rare thing, so it's great to hear. Uh, so um, so I want to. So I host. You and I met at the outsourced pharma capacity update. It's a event
Right.
that I host. You're a presenter there, and I get to sit down for like 5 days straight and hear all these presentations side by side. All of these folks talking about their capabilities and capacity. And when something unique happens, it really catches my attention. Okay. And what struck me about your presentation in Lifecore is it just sounded different. It was a different kind of culture. When I asked you about that, you shared with me your culture, your cultural values. There are four of them, and I want to ask you a little bit about that.
Okay.
When you come into a company, typically you come into an area, you're in a waiting area, an entranceway, and there's all that hazy terminology that's written on the walls, and you get a sense of, where this company is coming from. And so you have some values, but they're not a typical list. I'm going to just read them off: humility, ownership, metal, and excellence. So excellence isn't too far off the
A lot of
tradition,
folks have that one, yeah.
but the first three. So especially humility. Can you talk a little bit about that humility and how does that translate from something on the wall to how you operate?
Yeah, well, I think, um, and it's certainly a culture that's been developed over time, but I would say, our CEO, Paul Josephs, is definitely a ringleader of how we operate and really helping drive our culture. Even though he's newer to our site, he's been with us almost a year now. He's had a significant impact on really accentuating and maybe even to a certain extent simplifying what you have in front of you as our values. But the humility side of it is, you know, I would characterize it this way. I think in different professional situations and maybe with other CDMOs, the and you hear it through kind of just stories with clients that have worked with others. There's maybe a rigidness or fitting a you've got to fit into our peg or your peg into our operations to be able to for us to be able to support you. And I think on the humility side of it, it goes to just the breadth of what Lifecore has done and what it can do. Is there's an approach that we don't know it all. We have some really talented people in the building, and we've worked with a lot of things. But it's a culture of that's really solutions oriented more so than you have to fit into our process and our way, if you will. So, we're humble in the approach of and not making assumptions on different types of programs or the characteristics of a molecule, really digging in and partnering with a pharma company on trying to understand what they have, but then maybe even more so, what are their goals and where do they really want to go? And our approach is to take that know-how, what we have in the building, and apply it and work with the client on either applying because we've seen things before and can utilize the know-how, or we'll work hand in hand with the client to develop a solution for their particular problem. I think it'll transition some, right? Maybe, or at least maybe my hope is that with our growth, we'll be into programs that are maybe more developed and their thaw pool and fills, they're not as complex. I would like to be able to bring my team some maybe, less complicated things to work on, maybe more water-like, but nonetheless, we're not gonna, stop looking at and evaluating the things that have made Lifecore Lifecore. We'll certainly still take on the complex as well. The group likes a challenge, but I think it's all really just around approach and the attitude within the building. So,
Awesome. Great description. That's really good. Deep meaning. The other one that really caught my attention is metal. Mettle. We don't even use that in our common language nowadays. It's kind of fallen to the wayside of, it's not a characteristic that we look for, but there it is, front and center in your cultural values. So
it's a
can
good
you talk
word,
a little
right?
bit about that? Yeah.
So I think it's hand in hand really too with the humble nature or maybe the approach. But again, I had mentioned a moment ago that CDMO space certainly isn't for the faint of heart, right? There's there's puts and takes and ups and downs, and revenue can be lumpy, and our success is really predicated on the success of different molecules, right? I mean, anecdotally, and this isn't something at Lifecore, this happened a long time ago. I remember being working for a CDMO when we're building, kind of a revenue waterfall, right? And had a client built into it that was gonna be a significant part of revenue over the next, kind of the LRP that we were putting together. Handful of days later, that program failed in phase 3, so we were building out this revenue, and then on it, the client's gone, right? So I think those kinda turn on a dime type, um, situations or just impact to the business are a part of what makes our business challenging. And certainly on the metal side, you have to, be focused to help drive within your pipeline. And again, I think it talks to not being completely commercial focused or preclinical, having a good array because things will fall out and things will come in, right? To kind of smooth out some of that lumpiness. But I think as it relates to Lifecore, probably more specifically, is the metal side is really this can-do attitude of digging in and being, again, solutions-based for the client, and digging in and helping find solutions. There's a story that goes through Lifecore, and it was told by our former CEO, but and it's still a commercial program in the site, but, our CEO in a meeting, he ran operations at the time, told the client, "Well, we're gonna figure out a way to get this substance in a syringe. You're gonna have to figure out a way to get it out." And so sure enough, through heated needles and other things that our engineers figured out and developed, we were able to create flow and put this super viscous material in a syringe. And then when the client took it for their factors testing and working on it in the clinic, they were blowing cannulas off trying to push this substance through. So, um, and then we dug back in and created a packaging option that helped heat the material so that it flowed when it's used in the clinical setting. So I think that's probably one of the aspects of it. The other side too, there's a sterile filtration technology that our group has developed to be able to sterile filter highly viscous material. You don't see that across the industry, but again, it was this metal to dig in and create solutions or to solve problems for our client. And again, the other thing with Lifecore is certainly a blessing is there's going through the building, you'll find people with 20, 25, 15 years of tenure that have kinda lived these stories and been the engineers or quality people that have helped develop these technologies or these know-hows that have solved problems for our clients. So, it's a big part of what is and what makes Lifecore is just that can-do attitude and being able to help satisfy what clients need. So
Awesome stories. I love that. You can tell a lot by the character of an organization based on the stories they tell and
yeah, that
overcoming difficulty. Thank you for bringing metal back into fashion. I hope it grows even further. So thanks for
exactly.
that. One of the things that, as we've gone through this, one of the things that really strikes me, and I don't know how intentional it is, and I'm guessing it is. Everything is nested in itself from the very beginning, all the way through your values, how you synchronize operations, your business development with operation and bring it on. It's all, logically connected. One feeds the other. How do you stay on top of that? How do you sustain that?
Well, it's really driven through the culture, within the building, but I think probably the biggest that from a sustainability perspective, but even just, making it be a part of what is a Lifecore, we talk about at the beginning of meetings with Paul's leadership team. We talk about it through as it filters down through different teams within the building too. So that culture and the values aspect are reinforced, they're celebrated, but then, as much as anything, they have filtered their way through. It's not just BD living these values or engineering, what have you. It's discussed intentionally, and it's lived through and is active through all the different functional areas in the building, and that like I said, it's intentional, right? It's within our space, from, Paul Joseph's all the way down to somebody working, and I shouldn't even say down again, but all the way to somebody working in packaging and touching a finished product. Everybody has their job and their function, but ultimately it's to support our clients and then the patients that are using the medications or devices that they have created and are taking to the market. So, those values help drive us providing quality product and quality service to our clients and their patients.
Well, thanks for selflessly bringing us into Lifecore and sharing all of that. So, one final question, and so you've been in this industry for a while, and young people. Especially, I love talking to young folks who are still in college or right out of college, and I mentioned B2B life sciences, and they kind of look at me. What are you talking about? This isn't high on everybody's list
The same thing when I talk to
careers,
kids. No, exactly.
but for those of us who have done this, it is extreme. It's very personally rewarding. So, for somebody who's been doing this a long time, what kind of advice would you offer somebody who's just getting started or thinking about maybe entering this industry?
Yeah, I would agree. I think a handful of things that I always say, and I'll kind of leave you and frame it really this way. I think the CDMO space in particular, life sciences obviously great. The CDMO space is that on steroids, from my opinion, because you get to work with, I mean, it's not just a laser focused approach to working on one specific molecule. Let's say if I'm working for a pharma company in a lab helping development, which is still awesome, right? You're developing life saving or life changing therapies for folks, which is awesome in and of itself. But on the CDMO side, what I like about it is I can be talking to somebody about an oncology drug. I can be talking to somebody about an ophthalmic. I can be talking to somebody about some kind of an orphan drug for an indication nobody's ever even heard of, all in the same day, right? It's just this everything is custom and everything is different across all the different clients that we support or prospects that we're trying to help support. To me, that's exciting, and it's always a challenge, and it's always different every day and every conversation. So to me, that gets me fired up about the space. I think, one thing to leverage what I talked about earlier is just if you're in and on the CDMO side, depending on what your level of expertise or a speciality perhaps, but if you're in the NBD side, like, or marketing side of it is knowing capabilities and technologies. It's really important and it'll set you apart, I think, on the NBD side and really being that consultative type of salesperson, if you will, versus just turning and burning on getting proposals in or, RFPs in and proposals out. You really become solutions based when you understand what you have and how those technologies apply to the solutions that you're trying to deliver clients and prospects. I think the other, and what I would say has been super helpful to me is having good mentors. You know, is finding the people that, are successful, finding out why, what they've done, tap into the people that they know. I've been very fortunate to work with some of the best in the industry, and I learn things every day. And I think that, to be successful in the space, everybody has to do that, or you certainly have to do that. If you feel like you know it all, or there isn't any more to learn, then you're going to get left behind. So.
Well, wise advice. Thank you very much. That's really, really great advice. My guest today has been Darren Hieber. He is the Senior Vice President of Corporate Development at Lifecore Biomedical. Darren, how can our audience get a hold of you?
So yeah, anything social media wise into Lifecore, it's first name dot last name at lifecore.com is my email. Certainly happy to answer any questions about Lifecore or what have you as it relates to this particular podcast. But yeah, any through our lifecore.com website is probably the easiest.
All right, great. Darren, thank you very much for being on the Trailblazers.
Thank you, Perry.